Now, LA Theatre Works continues with Hold These Truths by Jeannie Sakata, directed by Jessica Kubzansky. Sponsored in part by the California Civil Liberties Program from the California State Library.
Here he is, lady.
Mr. Hirabayashi, State Senator Mary Farquharson. How are you doing in jail? Comfy? Now, how are you intending to fight this order in the courts?
Well, Senator, to tell you the truth, I haven't thought much about it. This is my first time breaking the law.
Well, I'm part of a citizens' action group here in Seattle, and we want to do something. If you don't have plans for a legal battle, would you agree to be our test case?
A gift out of the blue. I'm going to have some help. I've got no money, no courtroom smarts, no idea for how on earth I'm going to fight this thing. I just know I have to say no. But now I jump at the chance to say yes. And Mary charges into action. Executive Order 9066, signed by President Roosevelt, had given the military sweeping powers to banish anyone from the western halves of California, Oregon, and Washington without trial or hearing. So Mary's first call? The executive director of the National ACLU.
Roger Baldwin here. We've been searching high and low for a test case to challenge these orders, so I hope your Japanese boy will stick. Yes, we'll pay his expenses. Our national board has just agreed to fully support his case.
Then Art Barnett, my Quaker lawyer friend, scours all of Seattle for a lawyer to represent me.
Gordy, got your man, John Geisness, a partner with George Vanderveer in one of the most prestigious law firms in Seattle. Now, Vanderveer is known as a civil liberties hero, so this firm's the one for you.
Art had scored big, and now, my spirit's soaring, I declare myself not guilty. At my court arraignment, I'm charged with 2 counts, violation of the curfew and of the exclusion order. And we ask the judge if we pay bail, can I be free to walk out of here just like anyone else? But he says no. If the bail is paid, they'd send me to Puyallup. So I say no. I'm staying put. Then another call from Baldwin.
We've got some complications. ACLU board members demanding we support the president and not challenge his wartime orders. They've just voted to reverse the stand, barring support to any legal challenge to Executive Order 9066, which means we must, regrettably, withdraw support for your case.
The American Civil Liberties Union is turning its back on us? If they don't support us, who will? My case is gaining attention. The local press runs a story naming Geistis as my attorney, and boom! Enter the Teamsters, clients of his firm.
We halted all trucking of Seattle Jap produce after Pearl Harbor, and will immediately withdraw our business if Geistis defends a Jap.
So Geistis was out, and Vanderveer, and so was the ACLU. Art blows his stack.
Good God, what's happening? These Ivy League clowns running our country from Harvard and Yale, for God's sake, are turning our Constitution into a joke, and no one's got the balls to stop them? Call the Seattle Bar Association, the Washington Bar, the American Bar. Someone's got to help us.
The result? 3 clicks of the phone. So now my defense is all up to Mary and her scrappy citizens group. And despite the threats raining down on their heads, they dig in for the battle. And after countless letters and calls, the Gordon Hirabayashi Legal Defense Fund is born. Art tallies up the checks.
Charles Nelson, $5. Mrs. Albert Clausen, $15. Mrs. June Reardon, $7.50. God damn it, I'm getting all choked up.
I get a little choked up myself. Dear Ellie, I haven't been able to eat much, haven't been very hungry. I feel so terribly ashamed of myself that I can't eat what others are eating. Now, Ellie, don't you go baking me a cake. You know that's just what I want. Dear Woody, I've met my new lawyer, Frank Walters, older, 50-ish, Republican, American Legion member. Not someone you'd think would bat for my team, but a constitutional specialist who's game to take me on. Yoo-hoo Howie. Here I am at the County City building. My apartment's called the Federal Tank. I'm the 22nd person to be admitted to this exclusive fellowship. A couple of Negroes, swell fellas, 3 Japanese, an Italian, and more. Unfortunately, my roomies turned out to be a Jehovah's Witness, so I'm burying myself in the books you sent. Richard Wright's Native Son, Oscar Wilde's De Profundis. You got a great summer ahead of you. If you don't use it to the best advantage, I'll crown you good and proper.
Esther.
She stands there smiling with a basket. I lift the lid, A banana cream pie. It looks so good. I want to cry. A welcome change from hard-boiled eggs with cockroaches on the side. Then she hands me some newspaper articles covering my case. The Seattle Times, the Post-Intelligencer. She had saved them all. And not only that, but wool socks. And 2 books I've been dying to read. A book on Clarence Darrow and...
Gordy, taste the pie.
Oh my God, it's wonderful. No, really, it's amazing. Esther, you really shouldn't have gone to all this trouble. So Clarence Darrow. Now there's a guy who stood up and took the heat, huh? That whole scandal he weathered with the Scopes monkey trial.
Gordy, I skipped my chem lab to visit you.
Jeepers, Esther, you shouldn't be skipping class. I mean, don't you care about...
I care about you.
Gee, thanks, Esther. I
take her hand. My folks saw your mother, Gordy, at Tule Lake last week.
They saw Mom? How is she?
Well,
she tells me everything my family has gone through. Boarding the train silently, crowding into worn seats. A long whistle blows as the train pulls down the tracks. Dad watches orchards, farms, fields fade from view. He asks, Jim, after the war, will they let us come back home? The long ride down to Fresno, to the Pinedale Assembly Center. Days, weeks of waiting, shipping out on another train with all the blinds pulled down. The heat, stale air, stuffiness, the smell of vomit and urine, and then finally arriving, the camps at Tule Lake. A barren desert. Row after row of barracks of tar paper and flimsy wood. The dust everywhere. The wind, grim, relentless. The merciless heat. The lines. Lines for meals, for toilets, for typhoid shots, for lumber. Watchtowers. Guards with guns. Guns pointing in at them. Home.
Gordy?
It's Art Barnett.
The West Coast delegates to the House of Representatives have introduced a bill to deprive you, Nice, of your citizenship. Now, there's no way this could ever pass. It's a constitutional rat's nest, but I think you should know the score. Henry Stimson, the Secretary of War, he's caved to the West Coast racists who want the Japanese farmers out so they don't have to compete with them. And now Attorney General Biddle's collapsed too, that spineless son of a...
Art, has President Roosevelt said anything? Anything in our favor?
Zilch. Zero. God, it's inexcusable.
So the president doesn't see us as real Americans either? Thanks, Art.
Why are you thanking me? If I were you, I'd punch me for telling you news like that. And Gordy?
Yeah? My kid said to tell you, you're still her favorite babysitter. Tell him thanks. You stay out of trouble. I mean, more trouble. Yeah.
July, August, September. I try to stay on the beam by reading the letters pouring in. From people I never met before who hear about my case. There's a note and a check from a GI fighting in Guadalcanal. I'm fighting on this battlefield for the same things you are in prison. Keep the faith. Ernie Jones. I get some distinguished visitors, like the Negro Quaker and civil rights leader Bayard Rustin, who invites me to call him Rusty. And some other visitors like,
Dad? You got a new cellmate.
Genki, so da. You look pretty good.
You look pretty good, too.
It's been 5 months since we've seen each other. I take a few steps forward and put out my hand. Instead, he grips my shoulders and almost hugs me, awkwardly. Then he turns to the door.
Say hello to your mother.
Mom, how thin she's become. Her face is haggard and pale, her eyes.
Mom? Mom? What do I do with that? I'm all right. And you?
It's an insult, an outrage. The government has subpoenaed my parents to be witnesses against me at my trial. And my team's found homes where they can stay, since the owner can be deputized and my parents still under custody. But the government says no dice. Instead, they throw my folks in jail, say that is adequate housing. Dad tries in vain to cheer me up.
This way we get to visit more.
And he beams with pride when I tell him I've been elected mayor of the tank.
Mayor of the tank?
Mayor of the tank.
Wait till I tell Katsuno-san, Mayor of the Tank.
Still, I vow, I will never forgive the government for doing that to my parents. October 20, 1942, Seattle District Court. The U.S. prosecuting attorney stands.
Mr. Hirabayashi, I have 2 questions. Are you of Japanese ancestry?
Yes, I am.
Did you knowingly violate the curfew, and did you fail to report for evacuation?
Yes, that is correct. Judge Lloyd Black turns to the jury.
Based on the defendant's answers, it is your duty to find him guilty.
So that's it. Cut and dried. I never had a chance.
Mr. Hirabayashi, your sentence will be as follows. 30 days for count 1 and 30 days for count 2 to be served consecutively for a total of 60 days. Does the defendant have anything to say?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like a longer sentence.
I beg your pardon?
Your Honor, I realize this is an unusual request, but I've been cooped up in jail for 5 months, and I've been told by my cellmates that I can serve my time outdoors, in a road camp, if the term is 90 days, that you won't process the paperwork for anything less than that. I hope you understand that I'd really like to do this outside.
Well, okay. Yeah, I guess I could accommodate that. I'm an outdoors man myself. Instead of 2 consecutive sentences, how about 90 days for count 1 and 90 days for count 2 to be served concurrently? Any further objections?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mom and Dad go back to camp, and 2 days later, we appeal. We know we'll probably lose there too, but so much the better. The Supreme Court is our aim now. This is a national issue. And while I'm waiting to hear the results of my appeal, I'll wait out the rest of my time outdoors in a road camp. That's acceptable. The federal attorney throws up his hands.
Look, I'll say it again. The nearest road camp is in Tacoma, Washington. That's now off limits to you Japanese. And after that, the nearest one's in Tucson, Arizona. That's 1,600 miles south. And we don't have the funds to send you.
What if I go on my own? What if I pay my own way?
Pay your own way? To prison?
I've got to do this outside.
Well, hey, if you pay your own way, I guess I can't object.
He gets out a pen and writes me a letter of authorization.
Oh, golly, thanks. It's nice of you to do this.
Well, I wouldn't do it for anyone, but I'd do it for you. You have an honest face.
He asks how I'm planning to get down there. Greyhound bus, I tell him.
Well, you take care of yourself, you hear? Lots of crazies out there. Rah, 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 rah. And hey, listen, you have a wonderful trip.
I leave his office with his letter, giddy with relief. Thank God I won't be cooped up again, hemmed in by concrete walls. Thank God. Good God, Gordy, you finally flipped. You fight like hell to prove your innocence to the United States government, and now you go and volunteer to pay your own way to prison? What the hell were you thinking? I mean, it's against your principles, especially when you've done nothing wrong. So how are you going to get around this one, huh? How are you going to get around? I decide to hitchhike. It's the perfect solution. I wake up at dawn and walk out to a spot on the open highway with a sack, a coat, and a suitcase, toothbrush, and a bar of soap, Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, and an Abe Lincoln in my shoe, just in case I get jumped and fleeced and taken for everything I got. True, for a convicted criminal, my chosen mode of transport is highly irregular. I could be breaking the law. On the other hand, the federal attorney never said how I was supposed to travel the 1,600 miles south to Tucson, Arizona. So here I am, on the open road, free to commit espionage and sabotage every step of the way. I take the main highway to Spokane, cut down to the Columbia River. When the river heads west, I head east, through Pendleton, over to Baker, to the Snake River Valley in Idaho. Woo! Get a load of that view. I climb over rocks, ridges, and cliffs that plummet down to the river. I walk with my shirt off and get a heck of a sunburn. I wash and shave and sponge myself down in gas stations, bus stations, sleep in ditches by the side of the road, in abandoned shacks and sheds, in fields of corn under starry skies. I light my candle on windless nights and read Khalil Gibran by the light of the moon. It is not a garment I cast off this day, but a skin I tear with my own hands. A voice cannot carry the tongue and the lips that gave it wings. Alone must it seek the ether, and alone, and without his nest, shall the eagle fly toward the sun. And 2 weeks later, I finally get to Tucson. Tucson, Arizona, where the skies are not cloudy all day. The federal marshal's office, 106 degrees and rising. Even the cactus out front looks parched. The marshal is on the phone.
Well, hell, how was I supposed to know he was a Hopi? Damn son of a bitch looked just like a Jap. Yeah, stopped him, searched him, let him go. Christ, happens all the time. Hang on. Yeah. Hello, sir. How do you do? My name is Gordon Hirabayashi. I'm here to serve a prison sentence at this fine facility.
The marshal stares at me.
You a Hopi? No, sir, I am not. Look here, Jimbo, duty calls. Yep, catch you later. Now, what's the name again? Gordon Hirabayashi. Hirabayashi. That ain't Hopi? Japanese. If you're a Jap, why aren't you in camp, posting on Gila River?
I hand him the letter from the federal attorney.
You came alone from Washington? At your own request? How the hell did you get here? Well, sir, I hitchhiked. Hitchhiked? Yes, sir. Saw a lot of the mountain states, saw my girlfriend on the way, even stopped in Las Vegas and played a couple of slot machines. Son, you pulling my leg? Sir, I wish I was. Okay, let me check the files. Hanover, Hart, Hankelson, Himmel, Hoskins. Well, guess what? Nothing here. Looks like you're free to go. I beg your pardon? Nothing on you in the files. Guess you're a free man. Well, look again. There must be something, somewhere, someplace. Call the federal attorney or Judge Black in Seattle. Call your superiors in Washington, D.C. I'm sure they've got some documentation of my criminal record. I said you're a free man. Yes, and I take your word for it. I take your word and go. But someday you're going to find those papers, and then I'll have to interrupt my life and come all the way back here. I've come a very long way. I would just like to get this over with. Look here, tell you what. Care to see a flick? There's a movie theater just down the road a ways, and she's air-conditioned to boot. Now, you get yourself on down there. Cool off, relax, get a bite to eat. By the time you come back, I'll have this all checked out. Air-conditioned? Swell. So I'll be back, say 7? 7 it is. Go have some fun.
Well, I finally managed to get myself incarcerated. They take me up to the mountains, high above the saguaro cactus line, where I work the rock pile building a road to Mount Lemmon. Befriend Hopi Indians who are fellow conscientious objectors. Sweat through a steam bath in a hut they'd built on the hillside. And sit by a fire while one surmises his ancestors were the lost tribe of Israel.
Which means we could be brothers, since some of them could have dropped off to Japan while crossing the Bering Strait.
I look at him in the firelight. His eyes, his black hair. Yes, we could be brothers. A letter arrives from Art Barnett with the news we wanted to hear. The Court of Appeals is referring my case straight to the Supreme Court. And Captain Ravisto had been dead wrong in telling me I was the lone resistor to the curfew and exclusion orders. 2 other Nisei fellas, Min Yasui and Fred Korematsu, have issued their own legal challenges. Min on the curfew in Portland, Fred on the exclusion order in San Francisco. And now we're united in one thing: the determination to vindicate ourselves, and in our desire to do so in the highest court in the land. May 10, 1943, the United States Supreme Court. In the great marble palace, the red velvet curtains part. Enter Chief Justice Harlan Stone, followed by Justices Jackson, Reed, Rutledge, Roberts, Douglas, Murphy, Black, Frankfurter. Our team's ready. I'm confident. I've got a new attorney, Harold Evans, and the ACLU's back on my team. When they heard we were going to Washington, they agreed to back us, if we refrained from attacking Executive Order 9066. My team huddled, agreed. There was more than one way to skin a cat. The proceedings begin. My first attorney, Frank Walters, stands to state the facts of my case. But the court interrupts him, peppers him with questions. Why are you questioning the military in time of active war? Boom! Frank's 10 minutes are up, and he hasn't even finished. Next up is Harold Evans, who argues,
unlawful delegation of power. If America had been invaded and martial law declared, Congress could grant the president power to limit citizens' liberties. But authority over citizens may not be given to the military when the area in question is not a military area.
And now the government gets their shot. U.S. Solicitor General Charles Fahey stands and argues,
military necessity. They all need to go. Every last one. To keep America safe.
And that's what Charles Fahey must prove today to justify the government's orders. He starts with a tour of the Pacific battlefront, declaring the war
the most serious threat that has ever faced the United States.
He stresses
the importance of West Coast defense facilities, the dire need to protect them against espionage and sabotage, the vast number of Japanese living near those facilities, who attended Japanese language schools or schools in Japan, belonged to Japanese social clubs, who held dual citizenship, the vast number of Issei who have never become American citizens.
Somehow forgetting to mention they were forbidden by law to do so. He insists that during wartime,
due process must give way to the military's reasonable discretion. During time of war, it is not enough to say I'm a citizen and I have rights. One must also say I'm a citizen and I have obligations.
And now the justices deliberate.
We are engaged in a war for survival against enemies who have placed a premium on barbarity and ruthlessness. Self-preservation comes first. The United States wages war to win.
Justice Frank Murphy, my champion, responds.
But it does not appear that any serious effort was made to isolate the disloyal. Instead, 70,000 American citizens are deprived of their liberty because of a racial inheritance. Japanese Americans have maintained here a racial solidarity which has tended to prevent their assimilation as an integral part of the white population. This is so utterly inconsistent with our ideals that I cannot lend my assent.
I compare the orders with the military draft. A nation which requires the individual to give up his freedom and lay down his life certainly can demand these lesser sacrifices from its other citizens.
Undoubtedly, we must wage war to win and do it with all our might.
You cannot wait for an invasion to see if loyalty triumphs.
A country that wages war to win cannot sit in judgment on the decisions of its generals. But it will avail us little to win the war on the battlefield and lose it here at home. We do not win the war. On the contrary, we lose it if we destroy the Constitution and the best traditions of our country.
June 21st, 1943, opinion of the United States Supreme Court.
Where the conditions call for the choice of means by those on which the Constitution has placed the responsibility of war-making, it is not for any court to sit in review of the wisdom of their action or substitute its judgment for theirs.
I lost? They'd done it? They pulled it off with a unanimous vote? How? I can't catch my breath. I refuse to believe it. Surely the Constitution says what it says. Surely anyone who can read could see it. Surely any simpleton can see it. So why can't the Supreme Court of the United States of America proved that there was military necessity for throwing us all behind barbed wire? Justice Murphy, what happened to Justice Murphy?
Today is the first time, so far as I am aware, that we have sustained a substantial restriction of the personal liberties of citizens of the United States based upon the accident of race or ancestry. In this sense, it bears a melancholy resemblance to the treatment accorded to members of the Jewish race in Germany. In my opinion, this goes to the very brink of constitutional power.
To the very brink? To the very brink? It hits me. square in the face. Hits me like a truck. How strenuously I've denied, how splendidly I've defied what I must have always known. An American? Me, Gordon Hirabayashi, who'd grown up worshiping Abe Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, who'd memorized the preamble, the Gettysburg Address, who'd boasted time and time again, I am an American. Well, to many in this country, indeed to the people running it, to the justices of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, perhaps even to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, I am no more than a Jap. After serving my 90 days, they released me.
Helpful hints for a successful relocation.
And by now, they're starting to let some of us out of the camps.
You are leaving a relocation center to resume life in a normal community.
And my family has gotten out and are working the sugar beet harvest over in Weiser, Idaho.
Life in America today is not the same as when you withdrew from it a year ago.
And it's there that I hook up with them. They've all lost weight and look pretty scruffy, and I look even worse.
Always remember your ultimate desire, a free and equal life in America. To attain it may require sacrifices on your part during these trying times.
Most of our things in storage have been looted or destroyed, so we have to rebuild our lives and we have to start from scratch. Which is pretty hard, considering the signs we now see in the stores. No Japs welcome back here.
Don't speak Japanese in public places.
To make matters worse, my single 90-day sentence had served for 2 counts. And the court used that as an excuse to only rule on one of them, the curfew. The exclusion order, the real issue, they didn't even touch it. So by insisting on serving my time outdoors, I had inadvertently shot myself in the foot.
Don't gang up in large groups to inconvenience and antagonize the local people.
Then comes the loyalty questionnaire. Are you willing to serve in the armed forces of the United States? Will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States government and forswear any form of allegiance to the Japanese emperor?
Don't patronize honky-tonks, nightclubs, or bars. It is not good for Japanese Americans to be conspicuous.
I know this might shock you, but I sit down and write a letter. I'd be happy to answer this questionnaire if it's being asked of all Americans. However, it's been brought to my attention that this is only being distributed to people of Japanese ancestry, which would therefore be racially discriminatory. I'd like your clarification. I stamp the envelope, lick it shut, and toss it into the mailbox.
The public is slow to recognize your status as an American. Keep this in mind when prejudices and discrimination hurt you. Try to make a favorable impression on everyone you meet.
One day, while I'm mending the fence, Mom put something in my hand, a black, polished stone. An artist named Takuda-san had gotten the word in camp. His only son had fallen in the hills of Cassino, Italy, fighting with other Nisei in the 100th Battalion. And heavy with grief, Takuda-san had searched for this stone in camp. It was fall then in Tule Lake when the blistering summer heat descends to a bitter autumn chill. And day after day, Takuda-san sat, smoothing the stone with his aged hands, hearing the cries of the wild geese as they soared beyond the barbed wire. I look at the stone in my hand. It shines like a small black moon. On it, Takuda-san has painstakingly carved some kanji, a few tiny characters expertly etched on the surface. Kogen no ishi ni kizami uta mo nash. I carve on this stone from the high plateau, but I have no song. So many lost so much. So many lives shattered. So many hopes destroyed. My Hopi friend tells me, "You're talking out of your fucking hatch. The Constitution wasn't written for you, my friend, and it wasn't written for me." And of course I understand. What could the Constitution mean to him? A Hopi on a reservation, whose people have experienced little more than American betrayal, slaughter, theft, and a string of shattered promises? But I will not give up on the Constitution. I will not forsake the fundamental principles upon which I've always based being an American. Instead, I slowly begin to revise my perspective under the new circumstances. Until now, I had regarded the members of the Supreme Court as a group above ordinary weaknesses, in my emerging understanding, they become a group of 9 people, endowed with all the noble and ignoble qualities of other human beings. Most importantly, I begin to distinguish between the Constitution and the people entrusted to uphold it. My failure in challenging the curfew and exclusion orders is shared by my fellow protesters. Min Yusui loses his case on the curfew, and Floyd Korematsu loses his on the exclusion order as well. The court declares our mass incarceration is indeed constitutional. But this time, it is not unanimous.
An erroneous assumption of racial guilt. The ugly abyss of racism.
Justice Robert Jackson, Justice Owen Roberts, Justice Frank Murphy, dissenting. It's way too little and way too late. But it is something. Something like the faintest glimmer of light. On my wedding day, I get up and I look around me. Clouds are relaxing long and smooth in an Easter blue sky. Clouds resting on the mountaintops looking like fields of snow. It doesn't even matter that there's a warrant out for my arrest, thanks to my rejection of the loyalty questionnaire. Yes, soon the feds will be coming around to cart me off to prison again, so Esther and I deem it best to tie the knot at once. It's a simple Quaker wedding. No luxuries, no frills. We couldn't have afforded them, and of course, as a Quaker, I am philosophically opposed to them. But Esther is radiant in a white dress, a tiny star in her hand. Yes, she has a ring. No, it wasn't my idea.
Quakers don't believe in trinkets, Ma. We don't need a ring. Every girl dreams of wearing a ring on her wedding day. But I don't care if she is a Quaker. You get that girl a ring.
For once, I did not argue. When we pronounce ourselves man and wife, I hear birds trilling, as if celebrating the mere state of being free. The newspaper runs a story on us. Quaker girl's parents okay marriage to Jap American. But no one can ruin this day for me. Today, there is only light. When I leave the McNeil Federal Penitentiary after serving a year's sentence for my lack of loyalty, I have a surprise waiting. My wife, holding a basket. And in it, twin baby girls. The babies are asleep. There they are. 2 tiny beings, perfect, pure, complete, and as yet unburdened by what a troubled world might call them. We name our babies Sharon Mitsu and Marion Setsu. And eventually I return to college and earn my doctorate in sociology, and I take a job overseas, teaching in Lebanon and Egypt. And we have another child, this time a baby boy named Jay. And when we return home, years later, I accept a teaching post in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And the years pass, and I teach class, and my kids grow up, and my hair grays, and one night, after a poker game, I get a phone call out of the blue.
Hello. Hello? Yes, this is he. Dr. Peter who?
A professor of law from the University of California, Dr. Peter Irons, who says he's just unearthed a box of secret classified documents showing the government had suppressed, altered, and destroyed crucial evidence in my Supreme Court case.
What?
A Nisei woman, Aiko Yoshinaga, had found the smoking gun lying on a desk in the Federal Archives, a secret report from the War Department by General John DeWitt stating there was no military necessity for our mass incarceration.
You're kidding.
Saying the Army had sufficient time to determine the loyal from the disloyal, but that the racial characteristics of the Japanese would make it near impossible to separate the sheep from the goats.
Go on, Dr. Irons.
And there's more evidence, he says. Documents from the FBI, from the Office of Naval Intelligence, boxes of letters, memos, reports, all pointing to the same conclusion. Our mass incarceration had been caused by racism and hysteria, and the War Department, fully aware of this, had deliberately deceived the court. And he says, I'm calling to ask permission to reopen your case. And I say,
I have been waiting for your call For 40 years. Let's go.
And I head back into the Seattle courtroom, the very same one where I'd been tried 4 decades ago. And for an instant, in my mind, I see the faces of some of the men who had sealed our fate. Attorney General Biddle, Secretary of War Stimson, the President himself, the military's John McCloy, who'd once declared the Constitution is just a scrap of paper. They give way now to Japanese faces without barbed wire in front of them. Faces of family and Seattle friends, of so many former internees, of the young Sansei lawyers on my team volunteering years of their time. A gallery of American faces looking up at mine. And once again I say it. Ancestry is not a crime. And now in 1987, after a 5-year battle, we hear a verdict again.
The judgments as to the exclusion and curfew convictions are reversed, with instructions to grant Hirabayashi's petition to vacate both convictions.
And the room explodes into cheers. Then press conferences, headlines, stories on the evening news. CBS Ed Bradley interviewing me for a story on 60 Minutes. Everyone asking, Dr. Hirabayashi, tell us how it feels. Well, it's been a long road to get to this point. A long and difficult road. And even though we've come this far, we've farther still to go. But on this day, today, it feels like I've finally come home. My America, the one I see, is covered with squares of darkness and light. My America, the one I know, searches for self-evident truth and sees and shreds and fragments. My America, the one I love, is not just matter, but spirit. It is before, beneath, over, above, under, around, and through me. It's a big country. A big country. Deru kuge wa utareru, Dad first said it to me. The nail that sticks out is the one that gets hit. It's an old Japanese proverb. To stay out of danger or harm's way, one should conform. One should obey. One should be inconspicuous. Unless, he told me later, unless the hammer is smaller than the nail. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. I'm somewhat aware of what was and is. I have a glimpse of what ought to be. I seek to live as though the ought to be is.
This is LA TheatreWorks' production of Hold These Truths by Jeannie Sakata, directed by Jessica Kubzansky. Sponsored in part by the California Civil Liberties Program from the California State Library. Starring Ryun Yu as Gordon Hirabayashi. Additional voices by Matthew Floyd Miller, Suzy Nakamura, Matt Walker, and Greg Watanabe. Associate Artistic Director Annalise Erikson, Sound Designer and Mixing Engineer Mark Holden for the Invisible Studios, West Hollywood. Senior Radio Producer Ron Lipkin. Foley Artist Jeff Gardner. Recording Engineer and Editor Eric Cifuentes. You'll find Hold These Truths and hundreds of other audio plays on our website at latw.org. I'm Susan Loewenberg, Producing Director of LA TheatreWorks.